Our connection is final.
Permanent.
For the duration of your life.
You are part of existence.
A war is near.
Soon.
For the Radiant, he will kill you.
And your entire planet.
To die is to lose everything. Will you do all that is required?
To save your species.
Will you take his life? This is an interview about the future of Radiant Black.
Hello, everybody. I wanted to talk about the future of Radiant Black, and I wanted to talk about it with the only guy I can ask. So here we go. Kyle Higgins, award-winning writer Kyle Higgins, everyone.
Hey, thanks so much for having me. Nice to be here.
Now, I got a lot of questions for you, so let's dig right in.
Sure.
You've done what many people in their bedrooms and like sketchbooks have wanted to do for years, and successfully launched an original superhero universe in a world drowning what people call superhero fatigue, and I'm using air quotes. What do you believe the Massiverse has done differently to stay afloat as opposed to its smaller or bigger competitors?
That's an interesting question. I think it's probably a few things. I think first and foremost, while the edict from all of us has been to build hopefully really compelling contemporary original superhero books, there's also this underlying element that's really equally as important to us, which is we want to celebrate being fans of superheroes. And so in particular with the case of like Radiant Black, a lot of the outside the box stuff that we do, whether it's the secret animated short films or even the upcoming, we're doing an audio book with a full voice cast with, Will Friedle and Ryder Strong and Troy Baker and just this killer cast that's joining us. All of that stuff really comes out of this pure love for superhero media that I have. It's why I do this stuff to this day. And I think that comes across. I think the passion for the material and the constant, the constant kind of like unwillingness to settle for doing what's been done before and maybe is even cliched, and just this constant search for ways to subvert expectations and to tell stories that are both reflective of the world outside our window right now in the way that Marvel used to be, way back in the day, but is also made for all of us who grew up on superhero content. And that's, I just turned 40. That's me. That's a lot of people younger than me. I mean, we have been inundated with superhero media for many, many years at this point. And I think that is actually Matt Groom, who does Inferno Girl Red with us and co-writes, I co-write Ultraman and the upcoming, the Spider-Verse Venomverse book right now, and then the upcoming Immortal Legend Batman series. When we were getting ready to build out Radiant Black, I remember him telling me that he felt like the most unbelievable thing about introducing a new superhero is the idea that anyone in the world of the book wouldn't already know what a superhero is, because our day-to-day lives are so encapsulated by superhero pop culture and media. So in our case, it became a little bit of a meta-ness to what we were doing, where like the Marvel Cinematic Universe exists fictionally in the book. It also made establishing kind of tropes and expectations a little easier to then subvert. But I think ultimately, I think our characters, at least what we really try to achieve, is building characters that are as complex and hopefully richly layered as your real life friends, reflecting struggles that you and people are going through, things that myself and people I know are going through. And I think there's a relatability there that also lends itself to community. And then when on top of that, we are, as I was saying, constantly looking to try to push the boundaries on what a superhero comic can be. I think all that those types of bold swings also lend themselves to community building as well.
Would you argue that that the Massiveverse is a postmodern like superhero series in that sense, because of this awareness of genre tropes and because of this awareness of like in both in and out of universe of what can be done differently?
No, I'd actually argue that we're past postmodernism and we are into meta-modernism at this point. This is something that Matt, Michael, and I talk about quite a bit. And with meta-modernism, a few things are going on. First of all, it means that everything goes. So you look at something like Into the Spider-Verse, and there is this slight meta-ness to it all, but it's this ability and willingness to embrace eclectic storytelling, eclectic elements in a way that you're using them to a different extent than you would in modernism and even in postmodernism. I think there is some overlap in that sense between postmodernism and meta-modernism. But the biggest difference to me that really distinguishes a meta-modernist era is that with it comes, in my opinion, the return of sincerity. And I think when you see something like the new Superman movie, for example, which I just saw yesterday, I loved it. That was the biggest takeaway for me was, thankfully, entering an era where the return of sincerity is something that is not scoffed at, and it's something that is actually welcomed. And I think that was something that I was starting to find as a writer during my time on Power Rangers. And then as I became more comfortable with that, and in some ways it's in reaction to how uncertain the world feels to me as well, I think that art cannot be, in my opinion, divorced from the era that it's made in, whether you like it or you hate it, whether you're on the nose about it or you play with more allegory. We as creators are reacting to a host of things, whether it's stuff that resonates for us fictionally or stuff that resonates, or both good and bad, for us in reality, in the real world. We are a filter that we are then putting all of those experiences and feelings and opinions and fears through to try to create something that is, even just for a little bit, hopefully touching on some aspect of what it means to be human, that is unique. And I think increasingly seeing superhero movies start to have color in them again. And I don't know if you've seen Superman yet. I don't want to spoil it for anyone.
Oh yeah, I've seen it.
Hasn't. But there's that line about maybe that's the new punk rock. You know what I'm talking about when he says that to Lois. I don't want to say what he's saying it about, but what he says to Lois. I mean, that like I got goosebumps in the theater when he said it, because it's a great line. It's a great scene, but the feeling behind it is something that I think a lot of people, whether they were aware they were looking for it or not, I think it's something that that a lot of people are into.
Beautifully said, beautifully stated. More than I could ever ask for in an answer. I want to ask you about Cowl. I know it's been a while, probably. Obviously, it's part of the Massiveverse in the sense that like it is both referenced as like real world events in Illinois, as well as it being like something like the fan film that happened in it, like during issue 15, which ties into the Versus film. And like the political address, especially at the end of issue 35 recently, is like that, if anything is to go by, like these elements are like becoming more apparent again. Was it always a plan to include like characters like Blaze and all these characters from Cowl into the mythology, or was that just something naturally that you decided to do over time? And are there plans to bring more of those elements into Radiant Black during like the rebuild era?
Right. Well, it was never I mean, it was not the plan from the get-go, no, but it was the plan from very early on. It was actually something that came up in conversation between myself and Eric Stevenson, who's the publisher at Image. And he actually floated to me something else that I had done years ago as hey, maybe what would you think of like connecting this, to Radiant Black? And I was like, oh, I mean, I think that could be really interesting. Do you think that's it's a good idea? And we kind of talked through it and everything. And then very shortly after that, I actually reached back out. I was like, actually the one I feel like I know how to make work and might be really cool because what it would allow for us to do in both titles is Cowl. And Eric agreed with that, immediately. And so that was before issue 1 ever came out, but we were already done with issue 1. I think we were done with issue 2 as well, because there's some Cowl references in issue 2. I think there's a poster or the book is on Nathan's nightstand and everything. But this, speaking to what I was talking about before, where the book, hopefully we're able to celebrate, being fans of superheroes as well as trying to tell really contemporary new superhero stories. The idea of using Cowl as something that really happened in the universe back in the 60s, but then also using the media adaptations from the early 2000s in place of, and that's in place of my love of those first X-Men movies and the Sam Raimi Spider-Man movies of that era, where I was obsessively following news and leaks and everything about them online, and in Wizard magazine and stuff like that. So it ended up being kind of the best of both worlds, in that, we can, and because we're in this meta-modernist era, the idea of explaining is no, these events actually happened, but they were also made as a blockbuster biopic in the early 2000s. No one's really bumped on that idea that it can be both ways, because everything kind of goes if you do it right. As far as more elements from Cowl making it in, so two things. One, that scene you're talking about at the end of 35, I don't know if you clocked who that gentleman is who's speaking, but his name is Jack Marlowe. And I don't think it's too much of a spoiler to point out that Jack Marlowe is also the name of Grant Marlowe's 12-year-old son in the original Cowl. So that's the same character. So this is Jack all grown up, who is now leading the Franklin Group as they are going to make moves to occupy Chicago, for reasons that I don't want to spoil, but you can kind of read between the lines and probably make an educated guess based on what's been going on in the book and some of these conspiracy theories and these fears about, some of the multiversal migrants and the other timeline and Radiant Black and all of that. We have been doing this miniseries called Cowl 1964, and it's a 4-issue miniseries, and 3 of those issues came out last year. The 4th issue is not coming out anytime soon, unfortunately. We are doing it still. Rod had some other work that he had to take on. That 4th issue that wraps up the 1960s story, which really began in the original Cowl way back in 2014, or I guess 2015, or was it 2014? See, now I can't remember. I guess it was 2014. That 4th issue, when it comes out, you'll start to see how certain threads from the 1960s in Cowl may actually have permeated into Radiant Black in ways that you weren't even aware of yet. So there are some more instances of that coming up.
Awesome. That's fantastic. So I was looking into the original pitch that you gave for Radiant Black, and it was originally a Batman spin-off pitch, but it was also based on a separate comic you had called, it was a 6-pager, Radiant? Or was I confusing the two? Probably.
Yeah, it's not based on a Batman. I know what you're talking
The
about.
original pitch was a Wayne Tech employee like moving in with his parents in the suburbs.
Yeah, it wasn't a Batman pitch. It was something that an editor at DC had asked me if I wanted to build essentially like the origin of a villain as a proper series. And I never actually pitched it, but when I was playing around with the idea and the premise, I was thinking about doing, it was going to open with a late 20-something kid getting laid off from Wayne Enterprises and having to move back in with his parents in the Gotham suburbs. And I've lived in Los Angeles now for 20 years. I'm from Illinois, one town over from Lockport, where Radiant Black is set. I went to high school at Lockport. I know a lot of people who have had to move back in with their parents, with their families for one reason or another, who've had to move back home. So there was something about that to me that, like, even separate of like a Gotham centric setup, I just felt like, ooh, there's something there. Like I would like to, I feel like this is a good starting point for a very kind of like millennial story, millennial superhero story. But again, in the case of it, building it as a potential like new villain type book for DC, the reason I never actually even pitched it was because I wasn't in a place where I wanted to, I just realized I don't think I want to write that book. I don't think I want to write a book about someone becoming a villain, especially in these times. I mean, that would have been 2020, somewhere in there. And it was just like, this isn't what I think I want to do. And so like I said, I never pitched it, but that core was always in the back of my mind. It's like, well, there's something interesting there. And then there was a document that we actually published in the Radiant Black Massive Edition, the Volume 1 hardcover that we put out at the end of last year. There's a document, and the working title was called Vanguard. And that was something that I had been playing around with originally as potentially a live action digital series after I left Power Rangers. But then I kind of quickly turned it into, I don't want to say turned it into, I decided, you know what, it makes more sense to explore it as a comic, either a comic first or a comic just instead of altogether any sort of digital series, because there was no viable way to get it made as a digital series. It would have been expensive and it would have been original material. And it's just like, no one's paying what it would take to do this with where I'm at career wise and what the real viable outlets for something like this platform wise would be. So as I started building it out as a comic, it was set in like a kind of like, couple hundred years in the future. Like it was kind of a post-tech dystopic world. So it was kind of like Blade Runner cities and like a Mad Max kind of landscape. And so they're like these fiefdom cities that you hire Coyote if you have to move between one to the other, and they help transport you there. And then there was this miniature, the MacGuffin, the item that like was a source of power that had been lost for many years, was called a Radiant, and it was a miniature black hole. And so that aspect is that, combined with the Gotham setup of like having to move back in with your parents, those were the two things that I ended up pulling from as, and the title, the working title was Vanguard, but at a certain point in the document, I started referring to it as Radiant Black. And I really liked the name, and I'm not always great at naming things, so I really liked the name. I really liked the miniature black hole as a source of kind of like transformative powers, and the iconography of it. And so once again, Eric Stevenson asked me in fall of 2019 if I'd ever thought about building an original superhero series and something contemporary and right now. And I told him I would kill to do something like that, but I never thought there'd be a market for it. And he thought there could be. And I told him, well, that thing I was talking about doing, because I was going to do it at Image anyway, I was like, what if I do it straight? What if we do it right now? And this iconography and some of these powers and then the setup of the moving back in. And I then set it in my hometown because I wanted it to be something that, if it worked, would be able to grow and evolve with me and our wonderful, co-creators and creators on this. So that if, we were making this for 10 years, it wouldn't be something that we would grow to resent, because you just have to stay in this one very firm place in time. If we designed it in something that had a lot of I don't even want to say autobiographical elements, because I say all the time, the book's not about me, but there's a lot of me in the book. By doing that, it meant I felt like the book would be able to grow and change with me and the rest of us as we were making it. Knock on wood if it were to work. And fortunately, so far it's worked. And we just sent issue 36 to the printer, and we're doing covers for like issue 39 and 40 right now. And I mean, we're not going anywhere. So
I'm glad to hear. You basically answered my question like without me even asking all of it. So I guess I'll move on to the next.
Sure.
Yeah. So the moment for me as a monthly reader, because I read this since the beginning, that really locked me in was like issue 4. The twist at issue 4. Obviously, it was planned early on that Marshall would probably take the Radiant for a while, and the end result with like Catalyst War confirms he's here to stay. But when did you decide that a comic that was like about a writer's midlife crisis or like a quarter life crisis was actually about like the crisis of adulthood between two childhood friends? Like,
that was from pretty much day one. It's funny because aesthetically, when you look at the characters and a lot of like the costume design, there's certainly an aesthetic influence from things like Power Rangers and Super Sentai specifically. Yeah. But I think there's actually much more Kamen Rider influence in DNA in the book than there is Sentai and Power Rangers. And that includes the fact that Nathan and Marshall is basically my take on a secondary rider. And the idea of telling a story about these two disillusioned millennials and their relationship, that's what the book's really about, is their relationship and navigating unfulfilled potential and failed dreams and feelings of worthlessness. And I don't know how old you are, but like as a millennial, like it's been interesting. 25. Okay. So, I didn't get the internet until we were 14. I was 14 years old. And I grew up during the transition. And so I remember before, and obviously I remember after. And there are a lot of things about what was sold to us growing up, about the way the world is and what was possible, that hasn't really turned out to be true or viable for most of us my age. And I just thought that like that as a vehicle to touch on a lot of these issues, these generational issues, worked really well in my mind. I still have friends who are back home who never left or did leave and had to go back. And we talk all the time about how we thought this was going to go and how it actually is going. And even at this age, there are plenty of us I have plenty of regrets, we all do. And I felt like exploring these issues of our generation through the aesthetic lens of our childhood was like really kind of fitting, but it is definitely much more influenced by, like I said, the kind of like secondary rider kind of trope of a Kamen Rider, where I knew what the first 3 years of the book were going to be. And I had, before issue 1 ever came out, I had plotted in broad strokes
to 50,
year
correct?
1, not to 50, through 36. Although this was before we ended up 30. When I say 36, I mean like 36 issues worth. But I knew that year 3 was going to be the Catalyst War, and we were going to do this vote and then do both timelines. So it would be 36 issues, but the numbering would land at like 30, something like that. But that was the idea from day one. Yeah.
That's really interesting to know that like it was like all the way through Catalyst War and like Rebuild. Would you say that Rebuild came into like fruition halfway like through the process, or was it like during Catalyst War that the idea for Rebuild came to be?
Well, we knew we were going to keep the book going for sure. I had ideas about where we could go with certain things. There's also the whole cosmic component and mythology for Premiere and Accretion and that and Catalyst and that whole side that we haven't even really dove into yet. But as far as firm beats for after Catalyst War, I didn't have any. Like I said, I had ideas, but it was during Catalyst War where, we knew we had a lot of delays last year because not only the ambition of what we were trying to do with Catalyst War, but then there was personal stuff going on for a few of us. And I had another really, really big surgery and wasn't walking for many weeks. And, Marcelo was going through some things, and we were trying to do something that no one had done before in comics, which was exploring two timelines as two different releases for every release with two different art teams and two different scripts that are unique and different, but also reflective of each other. And then it all has to come back together by the end. And that coupled with the No One project that we were doing that had the huge ARG as well as the scripted audio series for every release. And that's all leading to a movie that we're doing now. Like, there was a lot going on, plus other books and other projects that people don't know about. And the one saving grace about the delays was that it did give us the time to make sure that we were going to stick the landing of the Catalyst War, which is something I'm very, very proud of, and I very much feel like we did. And then B, thank you. B, it meant that we knew it was going to be Marshall going forward. And C, we were then able to not only stick the landing, but then take all of the ideas that we had been starting to formulate and talk about what comes next. And we had a few months afterwards, because we took time off stands before we came back with Rebuild in issue 31 in February of this year, in order to get ourselves right, to get ahead again, to plot out, what the next couple years were going to look like, the next couple arcs. And so that's what we did. So we knew, like I said, we knew the book was going to continue. We had a shape kind of in a general sense of what we might do. And then that changed quite a bit as we were wrapping up Catalyst War and finding the elements that were most interesting to us, and also just looking at the way the world was changing. The world as it exists in 2025 is very different than the world that existed in 2020 when I was building the first 3 years. So we wanted to make sure that we were reflecting that as well. We want to stay contemporary. Sorry, I have a tendency to ramble, so please.
No, I love it. I love it. This is exactly what I like. I love to just let writers like you guys go. Like, you have so much to say, and it's always great to hear about the creative process. Like, it's truly fascinating to me. So with that in mind, Catalyst War had, pun intended, massive ramifications for the rest of the universe, with memories of an alternate timeline swirling in people's minds, and people like Yeager trying to get revenge on our version of Marshall. Will the impact of the second timeline affect more than just the events of Radiant Black, or is it just contained in crossovers like the one with Rogue Sun in 33?
Yeah, I mean, right now it's really just going to be affecting Radiant Black in that way. One of the things we really pride ourselves on, and again, I think this kind of comes, it's something that we are more comfortable with because of the meta-modernism, which is one of the things that goes with that is that people understand the shorthand much better now. Like, people, just even non-comic book readers, they understand multiple timelines, they understand kind of all this stuff, but they also understand, and people, some people complain about this, but I feel like people kind of let it go and just kind of accept it at this point, which is yeah, sometimes Spider-Man's dealing with a big threat, and he's not going to call it Fantastic Four or the Avengers. These books exist as their own things, except when they cross over, right? And we embrace that aspect. So it was important to me that every book be its own thing and feel like its own, I don't even want to say its own world or its own universe, but its
own corner of every.
Yeah, exactly. Like that was my thing from the jump, was like, all right, every book should feel standalone. And Michael was really big on this too. Michael Basudel, who edits and designs all the books. And honestly, we couldn't do this without Michael. But it was like every book needs to be accessible, needs to be its own thing. We're not going to do crossovers like existed in the 90s where part 1's in Radiant Black and part 2's in Rogue Sun and part 3's in The Dead Lucky, or things like that. Like, and as a way to, from a concept standpoint, as a way to really kind of like cement that for us, the foundation that I was adamant about was that every creative team pick their own city. So Radiant Black is set in Chicago and like Northwest Indiana, right? Rogue Sun is down in New Orleans. No one is in Pittsburgh. Dead Lucky's in San Francisco. It's kind of like having books in Gotham and Metropolis, you know? Like by building each book in a way, in a geographical region that's like not gonna cross over with the other books, or sorry, with events in the other books, unless you really want them to, it ends up meaning that everyone has to build their stuff to stand on its own 2 feet. And then that also means that when they do cross over eventually, the foundations are rock solid for everyone's books so that they can bounce off of each other without anyone's, you know, characters or IP being built reliant on anyone else's other characters or IP.
And I think you and Ryan and Melissa and Matt have all done great jobs, like separating each universe and making them feel distinct. Like you can open issue 1 of each one and like feel like, is this really part of the same world? And then you get the Supermassive and you're like, oh, okay, great, it is.
Yeah.
Totally. So Marshall has a new lady friend, Mariposa. And given she versus Clerks at the end of her first appearance, she's clearly meant to stick around and tease potential conflict. But where did the desire for and I hope I'm not using the term femme fatale wrong for Mariposa. I wonder what the desire for a character like her came from, especially since like her conflict is tied to the alternate timeline stuff, and how much of her character like have we seen so far and like in the future is like tied to Catalyst War.
Well, I wouldn't even necessarily say that she's tied to the other timeline. I would say that why she's doing what she's doing is tied to the aftermath of the Catalyst War for sure. But that has more to do with the fallout that is occurring in her neighborhood, in the city, in the larger city of Chicago itself, as a result of the devastation of Catalyst War, and the way that you have different developers and companies, even, which we'll start to see, who are using this as an opportunity to basically make gains for themselves in every which way, from land grabs to gentrification to contract work. Like, there's opportunity there, especially if you have money. And if you are, you know, Mariposa and her gang are really kind of coming out of the Pilsen area on the south side or southwest side. And what they are interested in and how they are pushing back against some of what's happening is really where her motivations are stemming from. The reason why, I gotta be careful what I say here. Part of what's really appealing and interesting to us, Joe Clark, who I co-write the book with now, one of the things that is really interesting to Joe and myself is that this is a title where, in particular, this rebuild era, Marshall has seen a glimpse of what could have been and what he could have done and become, and that's terrifying. That's something he doesn't want to obviously see come to be, and he doesn't think it ever will, now that he knows, and everything else, right? He doesn't even really know what exactly happens that led that version of himself from the other timeline to become what he became, to do what he did, right? The way he has approached the Radiant Black Mantle since the end of Catalyst War, and Nathan willingly giving it over to him because that's Nathan's arc. Nathan comes to realize and believe that people can change. And his belief in what Marshall will be and do, even after seeing what that other timelines Marshall did and became, like that's true belief. Like that's love, and that's a level of belief in Marshall that I don't think a lot of people have ever really put in Marshall before. And I think there's a desire. What's up?
Not even his own mom.
No, but that's, I think, a part of why there's a real strong desire for Marshall to not screw this up. And that means Marshall needs to level up to become the type of Radiant Black that the world needs. And that also is going to include figuring out what Marshall believes. And when you're coming in contact with someone like Mariposa, and maybe even having like a massive crush on her because of the movie references and a whole other host of reasons. Also, she's really hot, as he points out. I think that where Mariposa is coming from and what Mariposa believes may just challenge Marshall to figure out where he stands on some things. And I think part of growing up is coming to some informed decisions and beliefs on the larger world, on community, on society. And I think as we are trying to explore this next era of Marshall's life, I think all of that kind of comes with it.
All right. I like the idea of like her ideologically challenging him, especially, and like pushing him to be a better person. I feel like in any relationship, that's just kind of like what a good partner does. Like, and obviously I'm not saying they're going to get together, but it's a good thing, especially since like she's being posed as this romantic possible interest. But enough about that.
I mean, to be fair, Marshall doesn't know what her feelings are on French New Wave cinema either. So
does she like the 400 blows? Does she like them?
She's a Dogma 95 purist at heart, and Marshall's in for a rude awakening as soon as he figures that out.
Damn. So one yellow person to the other. New Radiant Yellow. New Radiant Yellow. You officially announced it with Will Friedle doing a voiceover. New character. While it's really sad to say farewell to Wendell, it doesn't seem like he's fully going away to an extent. But do you believe you said all you need to say with the character? Is the switch in users going to provide a different, albeit similar set of powers to like almost how Marshall and Nathan use Radiant Black's powers differently? Or what will they like provide as either like an ally or an obstacle going forward?
Well, it's definitely going to be a different perspective. We also have something really special in store for that issue. I'm actually boarding a flight in 2 days to go do it. And that's all I'll say. But we have something special in store. And it's reflective of the different point of view that I think this character affords and provides, not only on what these abilities are capable of, but also what someone from a very different walk of life might do with these abilities, and what they might think of them. And that's kind of all I'll say at this point. But, you know, at the end of the Catalyst War, there's when Nathan's when he's giving the eulogy for his father and he's reading the poem, we see where each of the characters are, including Wendell. And Wendell is with his daughter. And so he's still out there. He's not dead or anything like that. But as far as where he'll be in the book going forward, I'm not going to say anything just yet. But I think it's safe to say that like he's not, we'll see him again, basically.
He's not in the wind, but his significance has changed.
Yeah.
All right, that's great to know. You've obviously like answered another question earlier that I was going to ask about like the changes that have happened and like since planning the book and like what have naturally changed since even coming to Catalyst War and like going into the rebuild era. But I guess I would ask like, I guess, has the emotion behind Radiant Black changed? Like the original goal that you set out to do and like the thesis statement for the story, because you're very clearly passionate about like wanting to tell this millennial superhero story. And I've seen that in a lot of interviews. I've seen that in a lot of like your stance on what the book represents has not changed in so long. But like because of the nature of people growing up and changing, has there been like any slight change in perspective? Like any kind of thing that's challenged you as a creator that's been reflected in Radiant Black?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question, first of all. I think the biggest change was one that I was aware of, but it was one that I was, how do I put this? The arc that Nathan went through in Catalyst War, and really from the beginnings, from issue 1, about his unwillingness to really seek out or ask for help and feeling like his worth was tied to his productivity / achievement / whatever else in there in the spirit of those kinds of things, meant that he was pretty hard-headed and adamant about needing to do things himself and do kind of everything himself. That's something that I relate to quite a bit. That comes from personal experience. But when I started Radiant Black, one of the kind of points of growth that I felt like I had already started to make before the book was being able to acknowledge that in myself and being able to find a way to be okay with the things I wasn't good at. And instead of becoming my own bottleneck again, which I've done throughout my career quite a few times, I decided to find a way to make my peace with it and set my ego aside and to find people that could help me in the areas where, in the past I might have white knuckled it. I might have, there's a lot, this is a way longer conversation that we don't have time for today, but like it's in the spirit of that. And so working with Michael, working with, even bringing on co-writers for, the origins of some of the different Radiant characters, things like that. That's where that's coming from, right? But there is still this aspect of, it's Marcelo and my book, and we are the final call on everything, and really everything generates from us, and we are still, we're the ones. And at a certain point, when we were getting ready to start the Catalyst War, we were all in Chicago at C2E2, starting the scripts for it. We were all at Chicago at C2E2. Matt was there, Matt Groom, Michael was there, Michael Pasuto, Ryan Parrott was there, my amazing partner Kelly was there. And we're all sitting around and we're talking about this. And Ryan just blurts out, he's like, "You have to get someone to co-write the Catalyst. You're going to have a heart attack. You have to do this. You cannot do this by yourself." And I looked around and everyone kind of looked at me and was kind of nodding. And I was doing a lot. I was doing a lot, like across all the titles, much less the stuff I was also writing, plus trying to like run a business and run everything for all the other titles as well for everyone. And I've gone through burnout a few times in the last 5 years going through this. And I realized that I was slipping into old habits in some ways. And that's when I asked Joe, who's been one of my best friends since high school. I asked Joe to come on board with the Catalyst War and do it with me. And the Catalyst War was it was an idea that I was so immensely excited about and had been for a long time. I felt like it could be something that's like narratively kind of like my crown jewel. Like I felt like when I did Power Rangers and we did Shattered Grid, I'm very, very proud of it, but I didn't feel like I ever stuck the landing on it. And it's for a variety of reasons for it. But I also knew that I had become a better writer and I'd grown and I knew I could do this even as ambitious as it was. But I also knew that if I didn't get help, it might kill me. And I felt like, and this is the most important part, getting help, bringing someone like Joe on was the absolute best choice for the story. And the fact that the arc for Nathan was coming to a place of being willing to accept help was also something that I was going through. And some of my fears now, as we're doing the book and charting the course for the future, stem back to what this book is supposed to be about and the spirit of that, as you just said, and exploring these millennial issues and things like that. Well, I'm 40 now. You know, I started the book when I was 35, and the characters are still like 31, you know? And so our characters are aging, but they're not aging as fast as I am. And there is an aspect of like worrying, am I going to be able to tap into the things or find the things that are the most resonant angles on the concepts that we're looking to explore, you know? And by having someone like Joe do this with me, I'm not afraid of that anymore at all, because like I have a partner who is much smarter than me and much more worldly in so many ways. And we complement each other in so many different ways. And I think that kind of willingness and openness that we have to just to constantly try to push the boundaries, but to do it together is something that means that as the book changes and grows, I'm no longer afraid that we're going to lose the North Star, if that makes sense. Because I think we have the right people in place so that that's not going to happen.
Again, another beautiful answer. Very much like an introspective kind of thing. I'm very glad I pushed to that.
Yeah, it's a great question.
So moving out of just Radiant Black's future, you obviously are working on the No One movie. You're writing it alongside Brian Bucoletto. Your directorial, like this is not the first time you directed a film, because of The League is your thesis in like college, but since No One was this multimedia experiment with a podcast and an ARG and a film that ended up, like, what other mediums are you exploring potential adaptations of Massive versus characters with? You obviously mentioned the Radiant Black podcast, but even if there isn't much beyond that, what would you want to make?
Great question. It's actually, and so the Radiant Black, so it's an audio book, not a podcast. Only in that I only flag that because it's not like we're going to be doing a podcast talking about but there's actually a really great Radiant Black podcast that shout out to those guys that have been doing it since day one. But the audiobook is going to be it's going to be much more like a radio play kind of with the full, you know, like an audio drama. Anyway, here's what I'll say. I will say you very smartly framed it as the ones that I'm interested in and not the ones that we are doing or going to do, because those are different things. I will say the things that I am most interested in, and again, I don't want anyone who hears this to take this as like confirmation that we're doing any of these. We might be doing some of these. We might be working on some of these, but I'm not going to confirm nor deny any of it at this point. But the ones that I'm most interested in, so we already have this fantastic fighting card game called the Massive Verse fighting card game with Solus Game Studios. They did it in partnership with us with Black Market Narrative. So that's out right now. It's a player versus player, you know, fighting card game with 8 characters from the Massiverse in the box. It's a total blast, easy to play. I would love to do something in video games. It doesn't even have to, not like a AAA thing or anything like that, like something that speaks to our desire to push, you know, the mediums a bit as well. And so, you know, if that would ever come to be in some way, that would be incredible. Of course, something in animation, you know, for sure. We love animation. It's got to be the right fit. It's got to be the right approach. I definitely have some different ideas. I get asked about an animated show multiple times a day, and it's like, we'd love to do it, but you know, it's like a $4 to $8 million proposition, and we're not interested in. And by the way, I don't know that anyone is interested in the property in a way that, like, we don't have people beating down our door, like trying to go make Radiant Black stuff or Massiverse stuff like that. But even if we did, we've said this kind of time and time again, we're not really interested in doing stuff unless we're the ones, if not doing it ourselves, you know, very involved in making it. So it really means finding the right partners and partnerships to do that kind of stuff. In the case of animation, the reality is, if you were to go to Netflix tomorrow and pitch an animated Radiant Black show, they're going to want, even if they wanted to do it, they're going to want all the rights on the property. They're going to want the live action rights. They're going to want merchandising rights. They're going to want everything. And that's not interesting or appealing to us. Whereas if you could find a way to, say, do an independent animated project, then you're talking about potentially, if you can find the money to do it, licensing the finished work to streaming platforms, maybe building a case to build a larger series or show off of that. You have more leverage in those instances. But again, where the heck are you going to go find $4 to $8 million? So that's like, it's complicated. Live action, of course. But again, it has to be the right take. It has to be the right fit. We did get some offers in live action before the writer's strike. I was partnered with someone, a good friend, who very, very, very talented showrunner, as we were talking to a few places about potentially taking a big live action swing. And like I said, we had some offers. We decided they weren't the right fit, and so we didn't accept them, and we kind of walked away. If something like that were viable in the future, like, again, if it's the right partners, if it's the right take, if it's the right if it's the right approach, I think it could be a really, really cool, and especially Radiant Black could be a really, really cool show. What else? Action figures. I mean, of course, it's a no-brainer. But again, we want to do things the right way, and action figures are incredibly expensive to make, and we are not nearly big enough in the cultural landscape to warrant a big legitimate toy company who would have the resources to make the figures at the scale and quality level that we would want to do. And when I say scale, I don't mean like really tall figures. I mean production scale of, like, we're not interesting to those places yet. Now, the longer we're around, the more books we do, the more general awareness we raise, like, that starts to change the conversation. But this is why when you go back to like the old model in the 80s, you look at something like Ninja Turtles, like the cartoon is done as a way to build general awareness to help sell the toy line. Yeah. Like, that was the model. Like, we don't really have that in the same way anymore. And with the fractured nature of entertainment that exists right now, like, it's harder and harder to do anything like that in legacy media. But then it becomes a question of like, okay, well, what's the new version? Like, how do you do it with the current landscape of media? And are there opportunities and ways to do things like that? that are, it's in the spirit of the stuff from back then, but it's done with the tools and platforms that are available now. Maybe stay tuned, on all that stuff, I guess. And then, I'm a movie nerd first and foremost at heart. So anything designed as a film in any way, shape, or form is like inherently interesting to me. I don't care whether it's animated or live action or, yeah, I mean, I just love the format. So I think those are the big ones. I mean, certainly there are plenty of other ideas for books. There are other age ranges that I'm really interested in building material for. Doing stuff for, well, I don't even want to say, but yeah, there's some stuff there that's interesting to me too.
So you mentioned obviously like how hard it is to do kind of like anything that's built to sell a product to an extent, like these series like Power Rangers were in the 90s, and like all these toy-based franchises that had shows, and Radiant Black is coming from a completely different perspective. But given like you're doing Immortal Legend Batman next month, or you have written Immortal Legend Batman with all of these great people that have been involved in the massive verses and otherwise, and like given the longevity of like a lot of these tokusatsu properties that you're drawing from for this, like how much does that influence, or like any of that stuff? Because I know Matt Groom has his own podcast talking about Super Sentai and stuff like that. Like how much does the current goings on in that fandom, or like the current, just the general aesthetics, because you mentioned secondary rider aspect of like Marshall, and that being baked into the narrative, like how much more beyond aesthetic is the influence of tokusatsu currently for you, especially going into something like Immortal Legend Batman, which is heavily influenced on tokusatsu?
Well, sure. I mean, Immortal Legend Batman for sure. There are other influences for Immortal Legend Batman though as well. There's sci-fi and there's westerns, and the lone gunslinger, kind of outlaw sheriff. There's a lot of there are a lot of different influences, but certainly tokusatsu is a significant one. And I there's a few things. I think that like there's certainly, even beyond the aesthetics, there are certainly conventions of tokusatsu that, in particular in Immortal Legend Batman, that we're using or playing with, and everything from kind of like the obvious being the transforming hero archetype. It's not even archetype, but like the transforming hero kind of subgenre of tokusatsu. But then things like named moves and different forms, especially on the villain side, things like that we're certainly playing with. For me though, I love all of that stuff, and there's some of that in Radiant Black. The bigger point of influence on Radiant Black from a tokusatsu standpoint though is actually, it's a little harder for me to kind of like quantify and articulate, but if I had to, I would kind of boil it down to an almost kind of like spirituality. I feel like there's a mindfulness in tokusatsu, and certainly, I mean, even going back to like, you look at something like Jew Ranger, which is what Mighty Morphin Power Rangers comes from. Yeah. I mean, the idea that the Megazord, the Dragon Zord, and Titanus all form essentially the Holy Trinity. Like there are layers to it that resonate with me, and I'm not religious. I was raised with religion, but I'm not religious. I think that in particular with Radiant Black, when we introduce realms like Existence and we introduce the giant existential robots and things like that, there is a kind of at times surreal, but certainly I would argue kind of spiritual quality to, or aspect to, the world and storytelling that Matt and I play with in Ultraman quite a bit. And I think Ultraman of all of them certainly has it the most. And that stuff is really, that stuff's really, really resonant for me. There's also something that I love about Toku that Matt talks about this quite a bit. It is this willingness and comfortableness with personifying the abstract. And so taking themes and turning them into, literalized kaiju is something that Toku has always been really, really good at. And here in the West, I think sometimes like you worry about being too on the nose and things like that. And instead they embrace that. And as a result of embracing it, then are able to do pretty incredible things with it and off of it and subverting it and things like that. So we're doing quite a bit of that in Immortal Legend Batman as well. There's less of that in Radiant Black, but there is some. There's some. And I think as we get into more of the cosmic side in the future, I think you'll probably see a bit more of it popping up.
It's great I'm glad that you also mentioned Ultraman, because I've been watching the new season. That's ongoing.
Oh, how is it?
It's good. It's good. It's a 30-year-old guy doing it. He's
Cool.
30 and he's going around eating yakisoba. That's his whole thing.
Great. Good. Live his best life.
Living his best life. So I have my final big question for you. Is just a bunch of small lightning round ones. Stuff that I've heard from friends that also do YouTube, my fans and also people from like the Existence Discord. So just a few quick ones. You ready?
Sure.
All right. So why is it called the Massive Verse? Supermassive black hole?
Yeah. So, so we have, I'm trying to remember the exact point of origin. When we decided we wanted to do the crossover that became Supermassive, we didn't know the title right away. And I think at one point even, it was Michael who named it. Michael had been, he floated using the word syzygy. And between Radiant Black, which is black holes, Rogue Sun, which is a star, and there was something else about Infernal Girl Red, I'm blanking on it now, but they all kind of had this celestial bodies kind of connotation to the title, to the books. And so when syzygy wasn't possible, it's the imprint that Chris Ryle has. I think it's still at Image. I don't know that it was announced yet, but that was the name of his imprint. So it's like, well, that doesn't make sense. But also, like, it's not an easy thing to say or remember. It just didn't quite, like, I liked the idea of it a lot, but I didn't feel like it was quite the right fit. And then Michael came up with Supermassive as, again, supermassive black holes. And then from there, talking about what the universe was going to be called, like some outlets started calling it Supermassive Verse or Universe or the Radiant Universe. And we just really liked the name, the Massive Verse. Matt comes from a marketing and branding background and building narratives for brands. And he quite liked it. And that, and I did as well. But I definitely, I like to sense check stuff like that with Matt for sure. And it just came about organically in that way. And it was something that was discussed on Discord, actually, like kind of in real time. Cause I went back and looked and I confirmed it in the Discord. I was like, no, we're calling it this. Like, we've actually been talking about this, and, someone had floated it as well. And I said, no, this is now the title. And then, Polygon used it in their write-up about the universe for the first time in January of 2022. And so, so that's where it comes from.
The very natural evolution of things, it seems like.
Yep.
If Marshall was not Radiant Black, would he be an internet film reviewer?
I mean, he may have been. You don't know. He might just not have had time to drop a video in a few years. Maybe I could see that. But that's a lot of work. That's a lot of
Work for someone like him.
Yeah, that's a lot of work. He'd rather express his opinions and feelings to customers than to the larger internet as a whole, maybe.
Yeah, fair. Dumb question. Will Nathan ever use the Radiant again?
There are no plans. I would say that. I guess never say never, but no, there's no plans for that. I mean, we meant it when we said it. Like, the vote determines who is Radiant
Who's
Black.
going to be?
And yeah, and I mean, like, again, the only way to detach a Radiant from its user is for the user to die. I mean, we certainly had we played a card at the end of Catalyst War by way of using this kind of like EMP type device that disconnected it. It'd be a pretty big cheat to play that card again now. So unless Marshall dies and Nathan gets to it first, there aren't any plans now. Sorry for everyone. I love Nathan too. Nathan was my guy, but got to go with the will of the voters.
So, given that it was teased in 34, with Jaeger flirting with Marshall's mom, will we get a Aunt May Doc Ock situation with Marshall's mom or with Nathan's mom?
You'll have to stay tuned. You'll have to keep reading. It's not going to be. I'm not going to say anything else. You have to keep reading.
Okay. I like that answer. Who would you want Marshall and Nathan to be played by in a potential Radiant Black movie? Hard mode, no Will Friedle.
Are we talking live action or animation?
Live action.
Well, that's a great question. I'll tell you my headcanon favorites. I'm blanking on his last name. Hold on. Let me. I know what it is. I just want to make sure I'm saying it right. Okay, so for Marshall, I feel like Joel Keery would be quite a lot of fun from Stranger Things. And then staying in that same ballpark for Nathan, I think somebody like Dacre Montgomery would be quite a bit of fun. So Steve and is it Billy? Dacre plays Billy.
Billy.
Yeah. And the funny thing, and this is again, it's the meta part that I love in this case. Dacre played the Red Ranger in the 2017 Mighty Morphin Power Rangers movie. So I feel like that's an extra level of, if you know, you know.
Last thing, anything you want to promote before we say goodbye?
No, I would say, any of the books, Radiant Black, Rogue Sun. We've got Infernal Girl Red coming up pretty soon, and in book 2, as well as Immortal Legend Batman dropping this August. So take a look at all that stuff. We have a newsletter that's for free. We're going to start doing more and more stuff through it, and it's going to be the place to hear about new announcements, cast announcements, stuff with the No One movie behind the scenes as we get closer and closer to like production. So you're definitely going to want to subscribe to that. And pretty soon there may even be some original narrative stuff that we're putting out there. Again, it's a free newsletter. If you just go to blackmarket.la, you can sign up for it there. And when you sign up, you get a one-time 10% off code for our Shopify storefront, where we drop, rare variants and signed and numbered editions and things like that. So I'd probably plug the newsletter. That's what I'll go with.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Kyle, for your time. It's been a true pleasure. For everybody out there, please read more Radiant Black. I need more of it. And take care.
Yes. Awesome. Thanks so much.
Thank you.